I did jump ship and gone off over the years. He said, right, I want a contract with you. So, you know, we was more than willing to sign a contract with him. And, you know, true to Tony Wilson and his style, when Factory was going under, he phoned Nathan up, who was managing us by then, and said, this is how you get out of the contract. Do this, this and this, say that, and you're out of the contract and we won't take you down. You know, what a gent.
Architect Ben Kelly.
I referred to Factory as unpaid social workers. Because it seemed to me, Jesus God, they're not making a lot of money here, but they're changing so many people's lives and giving so many people opportunity, putting such extraordinary, fantastic product out there, that they're unpaid social workers, was my own personal kind of take on it.
Eventually, not only did the Factory partnership disintegrate, but also the early friendship started to fall apart. Wilson and Erasmus drifted apart, better at setting out and setting things up than trying to maintain momentum. Even Tony and Vinnie Riley stopped talking.
First and foremost, Tony was a very, very close friend, but we kind of went our separate ways for a while. We disagreed profoundly over some of the things that were happening, mostly about the Space Monkeys, which was a band that he'd signed, who I thought were awful. And he spent a lot of money on them and lots of other things. And I just thought, well, it just lost it somewhere along the line, and I got very disillusioned. And I actually left Factory before Factory fell apart anyhow, not for financial reasons, just because I disagreed profoundly with the way Factory had gone. I felt that Factory had lost its identity, and that was the problem. And Tony was very upset and felt personally rejected and stuff, and it was just a very difficult thing to do, and a very sad time, really, for me.
New Order failed to deliver a new album. Happy Mondays failed to turn a recording holiday in Barbados into any kind of coherent album. A central lack of the kind of traditional discipline required to sustain recording careers led to ruin. The fun Factory were having ultimately required the kind of cash the fun got in the way of raising.
My only regret in my entire life is not going to Barbados, because I was in Los Angeles taking daily phone calls from Nathan, the manager of the Mondays in Barbados, and every day was another car crash, another this, another that, and we stopped the money. They were selling the manager's clothes and their own clothes for crack. No one told us it was crack central. So that was a bit of an oversight on our part. That was another Spinal Tap moment. What a mistake that was. We then stopped the per diems, which is what musicians have to live on day by day, and then they began selling their own clothes. In fact, their manager went out one early morning and saw Bobby the diver, who was the local fisherman and also the local crack dealer. And Nathan went, "Oh, look, there's Bobby the diver." Going, "He's wearing an Armani jacket." "It's my Armani jacket." Anyway, so this happened. And then on the last night, I thought I could fly there and get back home to do Granada reports. No way. So I didn't go. And I missed the last night. The last night, as we closed the production, at 2 in the morning, Sean was discovered with the fire doors open, and he was loading Eddie Grant's 2 studio sofas into a van to take down to town to sell for crack. I would just have liked to have been there. I wouldn't have helped one little bit. The album would still have been whatever it was and would not quite have worked. I'd just like to have seen the mayhem, because I was paying for it.
Factory farcically collapsed in 1992 with debts of £2 million. When Wilson is pushed on the relationship between Factory and money, and the representation of his character as amoral and irresponsible in the film 24-Hour Party People, he has this to say.
I'm intelligent enough to know what a profit is, and therefore intelligent enough to know that I was never intent on making a profit. I always feel sorry for my main partner, Alan Erasmus, because he was an out-of-work actor. He could have done with making money, whereas I got a nice middle-class day job. Why do I need money? So I think my idealism is much exaggerated in the telling of it. In the movie, I think Coogan was very sweet, and he played me as an affable clown. And the reality is that even not to make a profit, but just to do the things we did, you have to occasionally be a complete bastard. And I think I'm a complete bastard more than occasionally. A partner of mine described it as me going through my rhino coming out of thicket modes, which are not very pleasant.
London Records were prepared to rescue Factory, pay off their debts, and make the label a Wilson-run subsidiary. But it became clear that as Factory had no contracts with their groups, especially Joy Division and New Order, they actually had nothing that London wanted to buy. London could deal with the groups directly, which they did. Here's Yvette Livesey.
It was very simple. What they did is that Rob Gresson signed New Order to London, And as soon as he did that, he realised that he didn't have to sign factory records itself because there were no contracts, because Tony always went on the moral ground of having no contracts with bands. So actually, at the end of the day, I mean, he was never bitter. Tony was never, ever, ever bitter about anything. Never jealous of anybody, never held, anything against anybody, really. But, very simply, I think they were very short-sighted. I've always believed that. It's very strange. It's when you have people like Seymour Stein in the business, who I'd equate Tony to as well, which is sort of people who have real ears and real passion for the industry. You should keep those people in. And what happened to Seymour when Seymour was struggling was he got bought and he got dragged back into Warner Brothers and they looked after him. Almost total opposite happened to Tony, and I've no idea to this day why. And I think he wondered the same thing as well. But I think people were scared of him. I think they saw him as a maverick, and outspoken. And, people aren't very good at trusting and believing in outspoken and maverick people.
Factory, after all that, after the creation of a catalogue that ran into the hundreds, after the efforts that transformed a city and pop culture, almost didn't actually exist. Wilson, above everyone, got the joke. Factory's graphic designer, Peter Saville.
The strange thing about Factory is that we were friends in passing moments. So I kind of see Factory now as a system of sort of bodies around the central body, and Tony's quintessential role in that is bringing those disparate people together. Without Tony, these people and their activities and their kind of moments where they crossed and did things, this would never have happened. It isn't a business. No one signed up for a job. No one's there by virtue of a contract or an advance or anything to do with financial incentive at all. Everybody is just there because there's an opportunity to make something happen. The kind of the body that keeps that together, the energy that kind of drew that together in the first place and then holds it together, was undoubtedly Tony.
The Hacienda reopened in 1993, and because these kind of things mattered to them, Factory naturally turned to the original designers for advice on the aesthetic values of the security system.
We were consulted stylistically on the aesthetic value of the metal detectors and the placing of them, which was a fairly unique experience. It was a harsh reality of life at the time. So, I think it might as well have been full frontal and honest and not trying to hide that you leave your weapons at the door, thank you very much.
There was one last commission from Kelly by Wilson, this time without the financial help of Factory.
He kept talking about this place on Little Peter Street, and I know he struggled to secure the place, and it was a struggle to make sure that it was affordable. We did have a little falling out over fees on that one, and I thought he was a very naughty boy for a while, but, you get over things like that. I think it was right that Tony did live in a loft-type space. He loved the kind of Manhattan idea of lofts. And it seemed to me that if Tony's the ringmaster, which he certainly was, then why shouldn't the ringmaster have his own bespoke kind of environment where he could surround himself with everything that he loved and hatch his plots?
The Hacienda closed once more and for all time in 1997. There were accusations that the police had failed to help the Alien Club as they came under pressure from local gangs. Manchester City Councillor Sir Richard Leese.
We had a real problem in the city in the 80s with the police, and particularly with the leadership of the police and the then Chief Constable, James Anderton. And he is basically a sort of puritanical crusader. Wanted to impose a particular sort of very restrictive moral code, and that was more important than tackling crime and supporting freedom for people who didn't want to hurt anybody else to live the way they wanted. So I think we had real problems in the 80s, and they continued into the 90s. So I think Tony was quite right to raise those issues. They certainly made life very, very difficult for him and the Hacienda, and probably contributed significantly to hastening its closure. And the nature of pop culture was nothing lasts forever, and again it's one of the strengths of Tony. He sort of recognised that, and he was always ready to move on to the next thing.
They also had this wonderful theory in Greater Manchester Police back in the old days, which is if you found a club that all the gangsters went to, close it and you get rid of the gangsters. Actually they went to another club, usually ours instead. So they closed a club called the Gallery one Saturday night, and the following Saturday night they all turned up at our place. And very early on we went for a meeting. It was shortly after they'd brought in semi-automatic weapons at Manchester's freight terminal. Because they did that, the main local armed gang, they retooled themselves. And one night came round Manchester at the dawn of Acid House and showed us all their new